Two billionaires are locked in a 250-mile-high engineering duel to build NASA's next moonlander, and neither one is ready. A headline from phys.org put it bluntly: new NASA lunar contest could pit Elon Musk against Jeff Bezos. But here is the part nobody is talking about. While SpaceX and Blue Origin fight over contracts, China and Russia are quietly building a permanent lunar base, and they are not waiting for permission. The moon's south pole holds billions of tons of water ice, and whoever controls it controls the next century of space exploration. The Artemis program was supposed to put Americans back on the moon years ago. It hasn't, and the delays are not accidental. The real war for the moon is not happening in space. It is happening in boardrooms, congressional hearings, and classified military programs. And what comes next will shock you. NASA revealed the Artemis 3 crew and updated mission timeline in a CNN report that was supposed to reassure the public. It didn't. The original Artemis 3 landing was planned for 2025. That window has slipped repeatedly. The spacecraft architecture depends on SpaceX's Starship Human Landing System, a vehicle that has never completed a lunar-class refueling operation in orbit. SpaceX must execute roughly a dozen orbital refueling flights before a single astronaut touches the lunar surface. None of those flights have happened yet. Meanwhile, Blue Origin secured its own NASA contract for its Blue Moonlander under the Sustaining Lunar Development Program. Jeff Bezos is building a competing system designed to ferry crews to the South Pole. The Daily Mail documented the specifics, both landers in a direct technical showdown at orbital altitude. But the competition is not just American. China's International Lunar Research Station, built in partnership with Russia, is advancing on a parallel track. Beijing has announced plans for a robotic base phase by the late 2020s, followed by crewed operations. They are recruiting international partners, and nations that signed onto the Artemis Accords are watching carefully. The Artemis Accords now have over 40 signatory nations. These agreements establish norms around lunar resource use, transparency, and interoperability. China and Russia have declined to sign. Instead, they are building their own framework, one with very different rules about who can extract what from the lunar surface. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 says no nation can claim sovereignty over celestial bodies, but it says almost nothing about mining them. That legal gray zone is now the most contested piece of real estate off Earth. India has entered the race with Chandrayaan-4, its next-generation lunar sample return mission. Japan's Slim lander already achieved a precision landing in early 2024, proving that smaller space agencies can compete on technical merit. South Korea is accelerating its own lunar program. The moon is no longer a two-player game, and underneath all of this sits a resource that could redefine energy: helium-3. Embedded in lunar soil by billions of years of solar wind, helium-3 is theorized as a potential fuel for future fusion reactors. The quantities on the moon dwarf anything available on Earth. Here is the twist most people miss. Flying Mag published a headline that cuts straight through the noise. NASA doesn't quite know, referring to the agency's uncertain vision beyond the initial Artemis landing. That is not a minor detail. It is the central problem. NASA has a vehicle. It has contracts. It has astronauts. What it does not have is a coherent long-term strategy for what happens after boots hit the regolith. Congressional funding for Artemis has been a battlefield. Budget requests get trimmed, timelines stretch, programs get reprioritized every election cycle. The Space Launch System, NASA's own rocket, costs over $2 billion per launch, and critics argue it is a jobs program designed to distribute contracts across congressional districts rather than optimize for efficiency. SpaceX offers a radically cheaper alternative. But relying on one private company for the most critical element of a national space program creates its own risk. If Starship fails, Artemis has no backup plan for years. Meanwhile, the U.S. Space Force has been quietly expanding cislunar domain awareness programs, military surveillance capabilities designed to track objects between Earth and the Moon. This is not science fiction. The Pentagon is preparing for a future where lunar orbit is contested space. Commercial companies are pushing forward regardless. Intuitive Machines landed its Nova-C lander on the Moon in early 2024, becoming the first private company to achieve a soft lunar landing. Astrobotic attempted its own mission. Japanese company iSpace is preparing its next attempt after a crash landing in 2023. The commercial lunar economy is forming, messy, expensive, and real. But here is the hidden cost. Every delay in Artemis gives China more time. Every budget cut narrows America's lead, and every legal ambiguity about lunar resources leaves the door open for whoever arrives first to set the rules. The consequence is not abstract. Whoever establishes sustained presence at the lunar South Pole first gains access to water ice, the single most valuable resource for deep space exploration. Water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, rocket fuel, life support. The Moon becomes a gas station for Mars missions and beyond. If China and Russia build their permanent base before the US returns astronauts, the geopolitical implications are enormous, not because of flags planted in regolith, but because of infrastructure. Whoever builds the refueling depot, the communication relays, the landing pads, they write the operating manual for the next era of space. The Artemis Accords try to establish international norms before that happens. Transparency zones, data sharing, responsible resource extraction. But these agreements only work if the nations with the most capability actually follow them. China has made clear it intends to build its own system. India's growing lunar ambitions add another variable. With Chandrayaan-4 targeting sample return and future crewed missions under discussion, New Delhi could become a swing player, aligning with the Artemis framework or charting an independent course. The commercial sector adds volatility. If Intuitive Machines or iSpace successfully demonstrate lunar cargo delivery at scale, private companies could outpace government programs entirely. That raises a question no treaty anticipated. What happens when a corporation, not a country, starts extracting lunar resources? Helium-3 remains speculative as a fuel source. Fusion power is not yet commercially viable on Earth. But the nations positioning themselves on the Moon now are not betting on today's technology. They are betting on tomorrow's. The hidden war over the Moon is not about who gets there first. It is about who stays, who builds, who controls the rules. And right now, nobody has won. The question is whether anyone is even asking the right questions before it is too late. 1. The Moon race is not a sprint, it is an infrastructure war, and the nation that builds sustained presence at the South Pole first controls the next century of space access. 2. Legal frameworks like the Artemis Accords are meaningless without enforcement, and right now, no mechanism exists to stop any nation from extracting whatever they want from the lunar surface. 3. Watch the commercial landers, Intuitive Machines, iSpace, and Astrobotic are the early signals of whether the lunar economy becomes real or collapses under its own ambition. If you want to understand the forces shaping the future before everyone else catches on, subscribe. Tomorrow we are looking at the technology race that could decide whether AI becomes humanity's greatest tool or its biggest liability. You do not want to miss it.